phone screen glows beneath the table. Blind Date Live, Portland Jazz Lounge. Views jump from 0 to 1,542 in 30 seconds. Cleo smooths her burgundy dress, checks her reflection in a brass panel. She doesn't see the hidden camera angled from the booth behind her. Her friends promised moral support. What she doesn't know, they're broadcasting her first date in 3 years. Chat scrolls. She looks nervous. Betty ghosts. This is painful. Dario walks in. Tall, sharp jawline, devastating smile. Viewer count spikes to 3,200. Chat explodes. He's way too hot for her. Tell him it's a prank. Cleo extends her hand, unaware that thousands are watching her every breath. The Portland Central Library smelled like old paper and ambition, with notes of leather and the faint chemical trace of preservation solutions. Cleo ran her fingers along the spine of a 1920s first edition, a collected works of Edith Wharton, its leather cracked but intact, the gold lettering still legible beneath decades of fingerprints. Afternoon light filtered through the arched windows 3 floors above her basement workshop, turning dust motes into tiny constellations that never quite reached her desk. She pulled the jeweler's loupe from her apron pocket, examined the binding with the practiced eye of someone who'd spent 6 years learning to see what others missed. Thread still strong, pages yellowed but not brittle. The foxing on the frontispiece told a story. This book had lived somewhere humid, near a coast probably. Someone had loved it enough to keep it safe through moves and marriages and the slow entropy of time. Now it was her job to make sure it survived another century. Cleo set down the loupe, reached for her restoration log, documented the condition in careful handwriting that her supervisor said looked like calligraphy. She preferred pen to keyboard for this, preferred the permanence of ink, the way her notes would outlast the digital systems that would crash and migrate and eventually fade into obsolescence. Her phone buzzed. She ignored it. Cleo, come on. Marcus from Digital Archives leaned over her desk, phone extended like an offering. One photo. For the newsletter, you never let us feature the restoration department. The books are the story, Cleo said without looking up. Not me. Just one picture. Marcus. She finally met his eyes, gentle but firm. No photos, please. He retreated, muttering about missed engagement opportunities. Cleo returned to her book, to the careful work of preservation. Some things deserve to exist outside the feed, outside the likes and shares and infinite scroll. Some things were meant to be held close, experienced in private, remembered without needing proof. Her phone buzzed again. This time she checked it. Mira. Emergency friend meeting tonight, 7 p.m., my place, bring wine. Cleo's stomach tightened. Emergency meetings were never actually emergencies. They were interventions. The last one had been about her antisocial tendencies. The one before that, you need to put yourself out there. She typed back, can't. Early morning tomorrow. 3 dots appeared immediately, disappeared, appeared again. Mira. Too late, already ordered Thai food. Josh is bringing dessert. See you at 7. Heart. Cleo set down her loupe, looked at the book in front of her. Safe, preserved, exactly where it belonged. Then she looked at her phone, at the heart emoji that somehow felt more like a threat than affection. She had 3 hours to prepare for whatever her friends had planned. She's going to kill us, Josh said, adjusting the tripod in Mira's living room. She's going to thank us. Mira scrolled through her phone, sipping rosé from a stemless glass. Look at her Instagram. 12 posts in 3 years. 12. And they're all pictures of books. Some people like privacy. Privacy is a myth, Josh. We're in 2024. If you're not documenting your life, are you even living it? She set down her glass, leaned forward with the intensity of someone about to pitch a startup. Cleo is beautiful, smart, smart, and completely wasting her 20s in a basement with dead people's books. When was her last date? I don't think we should. 3 years ago, Derek the dentist, remember him? Talked about gum disease for 2 hours. Mira stood, paced the length of her apartment like a general planning a campaign. She needs help. Real help. Not just us telling her to download apps and sending her pep talks. She needs community intervention. Josh frowned at his laptop screen, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Community intervention sounds like a cult thing. It's called crowdsourcing wisdom. Mira grabbed his shoulder, her excitement palpable. We live stream her date. Viewers give real-time advice, like a choose-your-own-adventure romance novel, but real. Josh paused, looked up at her. That's actually either brilliant or completely insane. It's both. Set it up. Josh's fingers moved across the keyboard. Windows opened, streaming software, chat moderation tools, camera angles. He'd done this before for Mira's lifestyle content. Makeup tutorials, apartment tours, that disastrous cooking series that got 7 views per episode. We'll need a venue with good lighting, he said, already invested despite his ethical reservations. Somewhere she won't notice cameras. Mira's smile widened. The Velvet Note, that jazz place on Morrison, booth seating, low lighting. We can set up a discreet camera from the booth next door. She was already texting. I know the owner. We'll book the corner booth for Cleo, tell her it's the most romantic spot. Then we take the booth directly behind her. And the guy? Already handled. Mira showed him a dating app profile. Dario Castellano, architect, new to Portland. I've been messaging him as Cleo for 2 weeks. Josh's eyes widened. You've been catfishing someone? I've been facilitating a connection. Mira waved her hand dismissively. Look at him. He's gorgeous. Exactly Cleo's type, if she'd admit she had a type. And he seems, I don't know, real, thoughtful. Their messages have actual substance. Josh studied the profile photo. Dark hair, strong features, eyes that seemed tired but kind. Did he agree to be filmed? Of course not. That ruins the authenticity. Mira grabbed her phone back. Nobody knows they're being filmed. That's the whole point. Raw, unfiltered, real human connection in the age of performance. Mira, we'll blur faces if it doesn't work out. But if it does work out, Cleo gets a great guy. We get amazing content. Win-win. Josh wanted to argue, wanted to point out the 17 ways this could backfire. But Mira was already moving, already planning, and he'd learned years ago that stopping Mira mid-vision was like stopping a freight train with a hand gesture. He turned back to his laptop, started setting up the stream. What do we call it? He asked. Mira didn't hesitate. Blind Date Live, Portland edition. Cleo checked her phone. 7:47 p.m. The Velvet Note's entrance was tucked between a vintage record shop and an artisan coffee roaster. Easy to miss if you weren't looking for it. Warm amber light spilled from the doorway. Jazz drifted out, saxophone, soft and searching. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She'd worn the burgundy dress, the one she'd bought 2 years ago and never had the courage to wear. It felt like trying on someone else's life. Her phone buzzed. Mira, you're going to be amazing. Josh, relax. Be yourself. He's lucky to meet you. She typed back, I can still leave. Mira, don't you dare. We can see the entrance from across the street. We're your backup. If it's terrible, text the eggplant emoji, and Josh will call with a fake emergency. Cleo almost laughed. Almost. Her friends were watching from somewhere nearby. Moral support, safety net. It should have felt comforting. Instead, it felt like being on a stage she never auditioned for. She smoothed her dress, pushed open the door. Inside, the Velvet Note was everything the name promised. Red velvet booths worn soft by decades of dates and deals and whispered confessions. brass fixtures that caught the low light like captured stars, a small stage where a trio played standards from an era when people still believed in romance. The ceiling was low, intimate, decorated with vintage concert posters from artists Cleo recognized only by reputation. Billie Holiday, Chet Baker, Miles Davis. It smelled like whiskey and wood polish and decades of conversations that mattered, undercut by something warm and yeasty from the kitchen. The hostess, a woman with silver hair and cat-eye glasses that belonged in a Hitchcock film, smiled warmly. "You must be Cleo. Your table's ready." "I'm actually meeting someone." "Dario, yes, he just texted. Running 5 minutes late. Traffic on the bridge." The hostess gestured toward the back corner with hands adorned in turquoise rings. "I'll take you to your booth. It's our most romantic spot. Perfect for first dates." How did she know it was a first date? Had Mira told her? Cleo felt heat creep up her neck but followed anyway, weaving between tables where couples leaned close and small groups laughed over shared plates. Everyone looked comfortable here, like they knew the secret password to belonging. She felt like a book someone had misshelved. Right genre, wrong section, spine too pristine among the well-loved volumes. The corner booth was perfect. Too perfect. Curved velvet bench, table for two, a single candle casting shadows that made everything look like a film from the 1940s. She slid in, set her purse down, tried to steady her breathing. Her phone buzzed again. "Mira, you look gorgeous. Seriously, that dress is perfect." Cleo glanced around. Where were they sitting? She couldn't see them anywhere. Maybe outside still. Maybe. "Josh. He just walked in, southeast corner. Don't turn around too fast." Her throat went dry. She smoothed her dress again, checked her reflection in the polished brass napkin holder. Her hands were shaking. This was a mistake. She should have stayed home with her books in her quiet apartment and her life that made sense. She should have. "Cleo?" She looked up. The first thing she noticed was his hands, long fingers, calloused at the tips like he built things instead of just drawing them. He stood at the edge of the booth, holding a worn, leather messenger bag, wearing dark jeans and a charcoal Henley that looked expensive without trying to. Then she met his eyes. Brown, flecked with gold in the candlelight. Tired, but kind. The kind of tired that came from caring too much, not too little. "Dario," she said, and her voice came out steadier than she expected. "Sorry I'm late. The Morrison Bridge was..." He gestured vaguely, then smiled. "You know what? It doesn't matter. Hi." "Hi." He slid into the booth across from her, set his bag down carefully. There was a moment of silence, not uncomfortable, just waited. The space where two strangers decided who they'd be to each other. "I'm nervous," Dario said suddenly. "I should probably pretend I'm not, but I'm terrible at pretending." Cleo felt something in her chest unclench. "Me too." "Yeah?" His smile widened slightly. "That makes me feel better. Not that you're nervous, just that we're both..." He stopped, laughed quietly. "I'm already talking too much." "You're not." A server appeared, young, tattooed, efficient. They ordered drinks. Cleo chose red wine because it felt like the thing people did on dates. Dario ordered bourbon. Neat. The server disappeared. "So," Dario said, "Mira told me you restore books." "I do." "That's..." He leaned forward slightly. "That's actually fascinating. I've never met anyone who does that. Most people haven't. It's not exactly a dinner party conversation starter." "No, but it should be." He was studying her face now, not in a way that felt invasive, but like he was trying to memorize something important. "What got you into it?" Cleo traced the edge of her wineglass. In her peripheral vision, she saw the candle flame waver. "My grandmother, she had this collection of old cookbooks, not valuable ones, just recipes she'd inherited, recipes she'd handwritten in the margins. When she died, my mom almost threw them all away. They were falling apart, water damaged, but I couldn't." She paused. I couldn't let them disappear. So I taught myself how to fix them. Dario was quiet for a moment. Then, "That's one of the most beautiful things I've ever heard." Cleo felt heat rise in her cheeks. She wasn't used to this, to being seen. "What about you?" she asked. "Architecture. That's about building new things, right? The opposite of what I do." "Maybe, or maybe it's the same thing from different angles." He picked up his bourbon, swirled it gently. "You preserve what came before. I try to build what comes next. But both of us are trying to create something that lasts." They talked, really talked, not the performative conversation Cleo had braced herself for, the resume recitation, the carefully curated anecdotes designed to impress. This was different. This felt like two people who'd been holding their breath for too long, finally allowing themselves to exhale. Dario told her about a project he'd just finished in Seattle, a community center in a neighborhood that had been forgotten by development, where the buildings looked tired and the people looked tired, and nobody seemed to notice either. He described the way light moved through the space he designed, how he'd positioned the windows to track the sun, so that even on the grayest days, and Seattle had plenty, there'd be warmth inside. The city wanted something efficient, he said, hands moving as he talked, sketching invisible blueprints in the air between them. Glass and steel, modern, cheap. But the neighborhood deserved better than efficient. They deserved beautiful. "Did they let you build it?" Cleo asked. "Eventually. After I worked for free for 6 months redesigning until they couldn't say no." He smiled, self-deprecating. "Most of architecture is ego. Look at me. Look at what I built. But the best buildings are the ones that disappear. The ones that just hold space for people to be human." Cleo found herself leaning forward, elbows on the table, wine forgotten. She understood exactly what he meant. Her work was the same. The best restorations were invisible. You shouldn't notice the repair. You should only notice the book. Whole again. Complete. "Do you ever feel like you're fighting a losing battle?" she asked. "Like I can save one book, but there are thousands more falling apart. Millions. And nobody really cares because everything's digital now. PDFs and ebooks and..." She stopped herself. "Sorry, I get intense about this." "Don't apologize." Dario's expression softened with recognition. "I design a building that'll last 100 years, but right next to it, someone's putting up a glass tower that'll be obsolete in 20. Demolish and rebuild. That's the model now. Everything temporary, everything disposable. It's like..." He paused, searching for words. "It's like shouting into a hurricane." "But you keep shouting." "Yeah." He smiled, and there was something sad and stubborn and defiant in it. "I keep shouting, even when nobody's listening." The server returned with their food. Cleo had ordered without thinking, whatever the special was. It arrived beautifully plated, and she couldn't remember what she'd asked for. Across from her, Dario had some kind of pasta, steam rising between them like a curtain. They ate slowly, talked between bites about Portland, about the rain, about how strange it was to move to a new city and try to build a life from scratch. Dario had only been here 4 months, knew almost no one, spent most evenings walking the city, learning its rhythms. "That sounds lonely," Cleo said. "It is, but it's also..." He set down his fork, seemed to weigh his next words carefully. "It's honest, you know. I'm not performing for anyone. I'm just here, figuring out who I am when nobody's watching." Cleo's chest tightened. She knew that feeling, craved it. Her whole life was built around the sanctity of unwatched moments. Her quiet apartment, her basement restoration lab, the hours she spent with books that would never judge her, never demand she be anything other than careful and present. "I get that," she said quietly, "more than you know." Their eyes met across the table, held, and in that moment Cleo felt something she hadn't felt in years. The terrifying, exhilarating possibility that maybe she wasn't alone. Maybe there was someone else out there who understood that the best parts of life happened off camera, in the spaces between the documented moments. Her phone buzzed in her purse. She ignored it. The phone buzzed again, twice, 3 times in rapid succession. "Sorry," Cleo said, retrieving it from her purse. "My friends are enthusiastic." She glanced at the screen. Mira. "OMG, he's perfect. But you're being too polite. Loosen up." Josh. "The conversation is great, but you need to show more personality. Ask him something unexpected." Mira. "Yes. Do the thing we talked about. The fun question trick. Trust us." Cleo frowned. "What thing?" They hadn't talked about any. Mira. "We're watching from the bar area. Don't look for us. He keeps checking his phone when you look away. He might be getting bored. You need to shake things up." Her stomach dropped. Bored? Was she boring him? She glanced up at Dario, who was taking a sip of bourbon, looking perfectly content. But maybe he was just being polite. Maybe beneath that calm exterior, he was already planning his escape route. Josh. "Ask him the time travel question. Makes you seem quirky, interesting. Do it now." Cleo's fingers hovered over the keyboard. This was absurd. She should just put her phone away. But what if they were right? What if she was losing him to her own terminal politeness? She set the phone face down on the table, took a breath. "Can I ask you something weird?" The words came out before she could stop them. Dario's eyebrows rose, interested. "Please do. If you could time travel, would you go back and fix something in your past, or go forward and preview your future?" There was a beat of silence. Cleo immediately regretted it. That was stupid. Random. Exactly the kind of quirky for the sake of quirky question that, "Back," Dario said without hesitation. "Definitely back." "Really?" "The future's going to happen whether I see it coming or not. But the past..." He set down his glass, and something shifted in his expression. Something raw. "There are things I wish I'd done differently. Things I'd fix if I could." Cleo forgot about her phone. "Like what?" Dario was quiet for a long moment. His fingers traced the rim of his bourbon glass, and Cleo watched the candlelight catch in the amber liquid, watched the way his jaw tightened like he was deciding whether to let her in. 2 years ago, my design for a public library won a competition in San Francisco, he said finally. Not a huge competition, regional, but it was the first time my work got real attention, and the attention was a lot. Cleo nodded, staying quiet, giving him space. "Someone took a photo of me at the award ceremony. I wasn't even aware of it, just standing there looking at my own work on display. But the photo went viral. Not because of the architecture, because," he laughed bitterly, "because I apparently have good bone structure." "Oh, yeah, hot architect." That was the headline. Suddenly I was a meme. My inbox flooded with messages, interview requests that had nothing to do with my designs. A modeling agency reached out. It was... He stopped, shook his head. "It sounds like I'm complaining about something most people would kill for. And maybe I am. But it felt like everything I'd worked for got reduced to a face." Cleo's chest constricted. She understood that kind of violation. Different circumstances, same core wound. Being seen for the wrong things. Being reduced to a surface when all your depth was screaming to be noticed. "I deleted everything," Dario continued. "All my social media, moved to Seattle, then here, started over. And I know that sounds dramatic, but I just..." He met her eyes. "I needed to build a life where people saw my work before they saw me, where I could exist without performing." The words hit Cleo like a wave. "That's why you're in Portland." "That's why I'm in Portland," he smiled, but it was fragile. "So when you said earlier that you get the whole figuring out who you are when nobody's watching thing, I believed you." Cleo's phone buzzed again. She didn't look at it, couldn't look at it, because what Dario had just told her, this confession about privacy and autonomy and the violence of unwanted visibility, It was the exact opposite of what was happening right now. What was happening to him. Because of her. Because of Mira and Josh and their fucking live stream and... Her hand moved to her purse, to the phone that wouldn't stop buzzing. "You okay?" Dario asked. "Yeah, She forced a smile. "Bathroom, 1 second." She slid out of the booth, legs unsteady, walked toward the restrooms in the back, past the bar where she still couldn't spot Mira or Josh, past tables of people who seemed to exist in a simpler world than the one she just discovered she was living in. In the bathroom, she locked herself in a stall, pulled out her phone. "Mira, that story was gold. He's opening up. Keep going." "Josh, chat is going crazy. 8,000 viewers now. This is working." 8,000. 8,000 people watching Dario tell her about the worst thing that ever happened to him. 8,000 people consuming his vulnerability like entertainment. And Cleo had fed him to them. Her phone lit up with a notification. Not from Mira, not from Josh. From an app she downloaded once, months ago, when Mira had begged her to just try live streaming. She'd used it once to broadcast a book restoration as a favor, then forgotten about it. The notification read, "You're trending. #BlindDateLive, 8.2K viewers." Cleo's vision tunneled. She clicked the notification. The screen loaded. And there she was, burgundy dress, nervous hands, sitting across from Dario in the corner booth of the Velvet Note. The camera angle was from behind her, slightly elevated, the booth behind them, Mira and Josh. The chat scrolled impossibly fast. "She has no idea how lucky she is. He's gonna ghost her after this. Why is she so awkward? Actually, they're kinda cute together. Someone tell him it's a prank." Cleo's hands shook. She scrolled down, found the stream title, "Blind Date Live. Watch Cleo's first date in 3 years, Portland edition." Her name, her actual name, and Dario's face, unblurred, unmistakable. The bathroom door opened. Someone's heels clicked on tile. Cleo stayed frozen in the stall, phone screen burning her retinas, trying to understand the magnitude of what her friends had done, what she'd participated in without knowing. Dario had trusted her, had told her the exact reason he'd rebuilt his entire life. And the whole time she'd been, no, not her, Mira, Josh, but also her, because she'd followed their instructions, asked their weird questions, performed on command like a puppet who didn't know she was on strings. She could end this, right now, walk out there, tell Dario everything, apologize, burn every bridge with Mira and Josh, and never look back. Or she could, what, pretend it wasn't happening? Finish the date? Go home and deal with it later when she wasn't standing in a bathroom stall having a breakdown? Her phone buzzed again. "Mira, you've been in there for 4 minutes. Viewers are getting worried. Come back." Cleo looked at her reflection in the phone's black screen, saw herself the way Dario must see her. Careful, private, someone who valued the unseen moments, someone who was currently betraying everything she claimed to believe in. She took a breath, steadied her hands, made a decision. She turned off her phone, dropped it in her purse, walked out of the bathroom and back toward the booth where Dario was waiting, probably wondering if she'd run away. She slid back into her seat. He looked up, concerned. "Everything okay?" Cleo met his eyes, thought about 8,000 strangers watching this moment, thought about Mira and Josh sitting 20 feet away, orchestrating her life like it was content to be mined. "Everything's fine," she said. And then, because she couldn't do this, couldn't sit here knowing what she knew, she added, "Actually, no, there's something I need to tell you. There's something I need to tell you." The words hung between them like smoke. Dario set down his bourbon, his expression shifting from concern to something more cautious. The jazz trio transitioned into a slower number, something melancholic that made the silence feel heavier. "Okay," he said carefully. Cleo's hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against the table, felt the wood grain under her palms. Behind Dario, she could see the edge of the booth where Mira and Josh were sitting. Could imagine them leaning forward, watching this moment unfold like it was scripted, like it belonged to them. This isn't, she stopped, started again. The reason I know about the time travel question, my friends, they texted me, told me to ask you something fun. The confession came out in fragments. I thought they were just trying to help. I didn't know why they were so invested in this date going well. Dario's brow furrowed. I'm not following. Cleo pulled out her phone, turned it on. The screen lit up with 17 new notifications, all from the livestream app. She didn't open them, just showed him the most recent one. #BlindDateLive trending, 12.4K viewers. They're live streaming us, she said, right now, from the booth behind you, your face, my name. Everything you just told me about San Francisco and going viral and wanting to exist without, her voice cracked. I just found out 5 minutes ago, in the bathroom. I swear I didn't know. Dario went very still, the kind of still that meant the world was rearranging itself and he was trying to hold his place in it. His eyes moved to the phone, to the notification, then up to her face like he was searching for a lie he desperately wanted to find. 12,000 people, he said quietly. I'm so sorry. 12,000 people just heard me talk about the worst thing that ever happened to me. He wasn't looking at her anymore. He was looking past her, toward the booth she'd pointed out. Your friends. Yes. And you knew, for 5 minutes, and you came back here instead of... He stopped, picked up his bourbon, set it down without drinking. His hands were steady, but his voice wasn't. Instead of ending the stream, or telling me immediately, I wanted to tell you in person. I didn't want you to find out from strangers watching me on their phones. Dario stood up. The movement was controlled, deliberate. Too late. Mira saw him coming before Cleo did. She had time to grab Josh's arm, to whisper, shit, 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 to close her laptop where the viewer count had just hit 13,200. But she didn't have time to hide the camera mounted discreetly on the wall behind their booth, angled perfectly to capture the corner table where Cleo sat frozen. Dario stopped at the edge of their table, looked at Mira, at Josh, at the laptop, the camera, the phone positioned to show them the chat scrolling past with comments like, oh no, he knows, and this is better than Netflix. Turn it off, he said. Mira's smile was bright and desperate. Dario, hi. I'm Mira, Cleo's friend. I know this looks... Turn it off. Josh reached for the laptop. Mira grabbed his wrist. Wait, she said. Just wait. Let me explain. We were trying to help Cleo. She hasn't dated in 3 years and she's... You're still recording. Dario's voice was ice. Every second we stand here, you're broadcasting it to 13,000 strangers. 14,000 now, actually. The words came out before Mira could stop them. She winced immediately. That came out wrong. What I mean is, people are invested. They want to see you two work out. They're rooting for... You use my face without permission. Dario leaned forward, hands flat on their table. The candle between them flickered. You broadcast a private conversation. You turned a human moment into content, and you're still filming. Josh finally pulled his arm free from Mira's grip. Close the laptop. The red recording light on the camera stayed on. The camera, Dario said. Josh reached up, fumbling with the mount. His hands were shaking. I'm sorry, this wasn't... We thought... You didn't think. Dario turned back toward Cleo's booth. She was standing now, purse clutched to her chest, looking small and miserable and complicit. None of you thought. He walked past her without stopping, past the hostess with the cat-eye glasses who was watching the scene with obvious concern, past the jazz trio who'd stopped playing to see what the commotion was about, Out the door into the Portland rain that had started sometime in the last hour without anyone inside noticing. Cleo followed him. The rain was soft and persistent, the kind that soaked through clothes slowly and made everything look like an impressionist painting. Dario stood under the record shop's awning, hands in his pockets, staring at the wet pavement like it held answers. Cleo stopped a few feet away, gave him space. The distance between them felt oceanic. "I know you probably don't want to hear this," she said, "but I really didn't know. I would never, but you participated." He finally looked at her. His eyes were tired in a different way now, not the gentle tired from before, the exhausted tired of someone who'd had this exact thing happen before and thought they'd escaped it. "They told you to ask me questions. You asked them. You performed. I thought they were helping me. I thought—" She stopped. There was no defense that didn't sound like an excuse. "You're right. I participated. Did you know they were catfishing me?" The question came out flat. "The messages over the past 2 weeks, that wasn't you, was it?" Cleo's stomach dropped. "What messages?" "So that's a no." Dario laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Jesus Christ, I thought I was talking to you, getting to know you. But it was just, what, your friend building a character?" "I swear I didn't know about any messages. Mira must have—" Cleo felt sick. "How long were you talking to me?" 2 weeks, every night. We talked about architecture and books and what it means to build a life that matters. I thought—" He stopped, shook his head. "It doesn't matter what I thought." "It does matter." "No." He met her eyes and the look on his face was worse than anger. It was disappointment. "It doesn't. Because the person I was talking to doesn't exist. And the person standing in front of me let 13,000 people watch me spill my guts about trauma I've spent 2 years trying to recover from. So no, it doesn't matter." The rain picked up. Thunder rumbled somewhere over the river. Cleo wanted to say something that would fix this, but she was a book restorer. She knew the difference between damage that could be repaired and damage that was permanent. This felt permanent. "I'm sorry," she said anyway. "Yeah." Dario pulled out his phone, tapped the screen. "Me too." A black car pulled up to the curb, rideshare probably. He moved toward it, then stopped, turned back. "For what it's worth," he said, "the last hour, before you told me, that was the first time in 2 years I felt like I could be myself with someone. That felt real." "It was real," Cleo said desperately. "Everything I said was, but it wasn't private, and that's the only way it could work for me. Privacy, the one thing I asked for without asking, and you couldn't—" He stopped, got in the car. "Take care, Cleo." The door closed, the car pulled away, and Cleo stood in the rain watching the taillights disappear around the corner, watching the first genuine connection she'd felt in years dissolve like ink in water. Behind her, the door to the velvet note opened. Mira's voice, small and uncertain. "Cleo?" Cleo didn't turn around. The apartment was dark when Cleo got home. She didn't turn on the lights. Just dropped her purse on the floor by the door, heard her keys scatter across the hardwood, and stood there dripping rainwater onto the welcome mat her grandmother had given her 5 years ago. She peeled off the burgundy dress. It clung to her skin, heavy with rain and failure. She left it in a heap on the bathroom floor and stood under the shower until the water ran cold, scrubbing at her skin like she could wash away the last 3 hours, like she could become someone who'd made different choices. When she finally emerged, wrapped in a towel that smelled like lavender detergent, her phone was lighting up the dark apartment like a distress beacon. 53 missed calls, 112 text messages. The notifications kept coming in waves, each buzz another reminder that her private disaster had become public property. "Mira, please talk to me." "Mira, I know you're mad, but we need to discuss this." "Mira, the video is still trending. We should make a statement." "Mira, Cleo, please, I'm getting death threats." Josh, I'm really sorry. I didn't think it through. Josh, Mira's not answering her phone. Is she with you? Josh, I've deleted everything, the stream, the recordings, all of it. Marcus, work. Cleo, you're viral on TikTok? Marcus, are you okay? Do you need anything? Then the messages from strangers. Numbers she didn't recognize. People who'd somehow found her personal contact information because privacy was a myth and the internet was a mob with infinite reach. You're a terrible person. He deserves better than you. I hope you're happy you ruined his life again. That poor man, you should be ashamed. First date in 3 years and this is how you treat him? No wonder you're alone. Cleo scrolled through them with numb fingers. Each message a small violence. She opened TikTok, an app she downloaded once and never used, and immediately wished she hadn't. The first video on her For You page, Dario's face, his voice, the moment he'd told her about going viral in San Francisco, about deleting his entire life to escape the attention. Someone had clipped just that part, added text overlay. Wait for it. The caption, hot architect opens up about trauma, then finds out he's being live streamed, #BlindDateLive, #Portland, #cringe. 2.3 million views, 487K likes, 12.4K comments. She scrolled the comments. This is insane. I would die if this happened to me. The way his face changes when he realizes. Okay, but why is he literally perfect? Someone get this man a better date. Is no one going to talk about how her friends did this? Another video, Dario confronting Mira and Josh. The camera angle was from someone's phone in the restaurant, a bystander filming the confrontation. You could hear everything. Turn it off. His voice shaking with controlled rage. You used my face without permission. You broadcast a private conversation. 4.1 million views. The comments here were angrier. Sue them. This is literally a crime. Her friends are trash. I hope he presses charges. The manipulation is real. Another video, Cleo and Dario outside in the rain. You couldn't hear what they were saying. The audio was just rain and distant traffic. But you could see everything in their body language. The way he stood with his hands in his pockets, closed off. The way she reached toward him and stopped halfway. The space between them that might as well have been a canyon. Someone had added sad piano music and slow motion effects. 6.7 million views. This is so sad. You can see her heart breaking. Team Dario all the way. She doesn't deserve forgiveness. Imagine finding the perfect person and your friends ruin it. Cleo kept scrolling, found compilations, found reaction videos, found people dissecting every moment of the date, analyzing her facial expressions, debating whether she was complicit or a victim. A relationship advice TikToker had made a 12-part series breaking down the ethics of the blind date live situation. A podcast had devoted an entire episode to it. The title, Digital Consent and the Blind Date Conspiracy. Someone had made fan art, literal fan art of her and Dario in the rain, rendered in watercolor, captioned, What We Lost. She was a meme. He was a meme. Their private catastrophe was entertainment for millions of strangers who would forget about them in a week and move on to the next viral moment. Cleo turned off her phone. No, she turned it off and then turned it back on and blocked every unknown number. Blocked the comments, blocked the notifications, then turned it off again and threw it across the room. It hit the wall with a crack that sounded final, satisfying. The screen spiderwebbed but kept glowing. She slid down to the bathroom floor, back against the cold tile, and let herself cry. Not the pretty kind of crying from movies where a single tear rolls down a perfect cheek. The ugly kind. The kind that came from deep in your chest and made your whole body shake. The kind that left you gasping for air and wondering if you'd ever feel clean again. She'd become exactly what she'd always feared: a performer, a character in someone else's story, someone who violated the sanctity of private moments for the sake of what? Friendship? Content? The approval of strangers she'd never meet? Dario had trusted her, had chosen her specifically because she seemed like someone who understood the value of unseen spaces, someone who got it. And she'd proven him catastrophically wrong by sitting in that restaurant for 5 extra minutes while 13,000 people watched him bare his soul. The worst part, the part that made her cry harder, was that he'd been right. For that hour before everything imploded, it had been real. The realest thing she'd felt in years. The conversation about preservation and creation, about shouting into hurricanes, about figuring out who you are when nobody's watching. They'd connected, genuinely, and she'd destroyed it by letting it be witnessed. By the time the sun came up, Cleo was still on the bathroom floor. Her eyes were swollen, her throat was raw, and she'd made a decision. She wasn't going to work today, or tomorrow, maybe not ever again. She called her supervisor and croaked out something about the flu. Then she unplugged her router, covered her windows with bed sheets, and built a cocoon of blankets on her couch where no one could see her, and she couldn't see the world that had turned her worst night into entertainment. 3 days later, the video was still everywhere. Cleo had called in sick to work, unplugged her internet, covered her windows with sheets so the light wouldn't remind her that the world was still turning outside her grief bunker. She survived on crackers and tap water and the crushing weight of her own mistakes. Her phone, the screen cracked from where it hit the wall, sat on her kitchen counter like evidence. She'd turned it on once, just to text her boss that she had the flu. The notifications that loaded made her turn it off again immediately. Now she stood in her living room, surrounded by books she'd collected over years of careful curation, and felt like a fraud. She dedicated her life to preservation, to treating objects with the care they deserved. But she couldn't even extend that courtesy to a human being. There was a knock at her door. Cleo froze. She wasn't expecting anyone, hadn't ordered food, hadn't responded to Mira's increasingly frantic messages about damage control and our side of the story. Another knock, firmer. She moved to the door, looked through the peephole. A woman stood in the hallway, tall, early 30s, wearing a professional blazer and holding a manila folder. Behind her, a man with a camera. "Cleo Winters?" the woman called through the door. "I'm Elena Rodriguez from Portland Scene magazine. We'd love to get your perspective on the Blind Date Live incident for our piece on digital ethics and consent." Cleo backed away from the door like it was radioactive. "We've already spoken with Dario Castellano's representatives," Elena continued. "He's issued a cease and desist to the original streamers. We think the public deserves to hear all sides." Cleo walked to her bedroom, closed the door, turned on the white noise machine she used for sleep, and sat on her bed with her hands over her ears until she couldn't hear the knocking anymore. When she finally emerged an hour later, they were gone. But taped to her door was a business card with a handwritten note on the back. "The story's going to print with or without you. Give me a call if you want to control the narrative. ER." Cleo crumpled the card, dropped it in the trash. She didn't want to control the narrative. She wanted there to be no narrative, wanted to rewind 3 days and make different choices, wanted to exist in a world where she'd never agreed to that date, never trusted Mira's good intentions, never looked into Dario's eyes and felt the possibility of being understood. Her phone buzzed from the kitchen counter, one final notification making it through before the battery died. She walked over, looked at the screen. "Dario, we need to talk." They met at a coffee shop on the east side of the river, far from the Velvet Note, far from anywhere either of them usually went. The kind of place with mismatched furniture and art from local painters that nobody famous enough to recognize. Dario was already there when Cleo arrived. He'd chosen a table in the back corner, away from windows. His laptop was open, but he wasn't looking at it. He was staring at his coffee like it was a scrying mirror. Cleo slid into the chair across from him, waited. "My lawyer says I can sue," Dario said without preamble. "Your friends, the venue, potentially you, though he thinks that's a weaker case since you didn't know about the initial setup." "Okay. I'm not going to." Cleo looked up, surprised. "Why not?" "Because that makes it a bigger story. More articles, more attention. Exactly what I moved here to escape." He finally met her eyes. "I've spent the last 3 days having the same conversation I had 2 years ago. Reporters asking about my feelings. Strangers sending me DMs. Someone made a fucking fan account dedicated to my journey. It's..." He stopped, took a breath. "It's my nightmare on repeat." "I'm sorry" doesn't even begin to... No, it doesn't. He wasn't angry anymore, just tired. "But I didn't ask you here for an apology." Cleo waited. "The video is everywhere," Dario continued. "We can't make it disappear. People have already downloaded it, reposted it, clipped it into 1,000 different pieces. So we have 2 options. We let it define us separately as the victims of a privacy violation, or we take control of it together." He turned his laptop around, showed her a website mock-up. Clean design, minimalist. The header read, "Privacy in Public, a conversation about consent in the digital age." Below it, 2 headshots, his, hers. "What is this?" Cleo asked. "A project, an essay series, maybe a podcast eventually. We talk about what happened, but we control the narrative. We make it about the bigger issue, consent, digital voyeurism, the commodification of private moments. We turn our disaster into something that might actually help people understand why this matters." Cleo stared at the screen. "You want to work with me?" "I want to work with the only other person who understands how violated I feel right now." Dario's voice was steady, but his hands weren't. "You participated in what happened, but you also ended it. You told me. You could have let the whole date finish, gone home, deleted your involvement, but you didn't. That has to count for something. I don't deserve your forgiveness. I'm not offering forgiveness. I'm offering partnership." He closed the laptop. "I can't control what happened, but I can control what happens next. And doing nothing feels like letting them win." Cleo thought about the business card in her trash, about Elena Rodriguez and her camera operator, and the story that was going to print with or without her input, about the million strangers who'd watched her worst moment and decided they knew her. "What would we even say?" she asked. "The truth. That what Mira and Josh did wasn't help, it was violation. That streaming someone without consent isn't entertainment, it's assault. That privacy isn't a myth or a luxury, it's a right." Dario leaned forward. "I've been thinking about this for 3 days straight, and I realized I spent 2 years hiding from what happened in San Francisco, running, building a new life in the shadows, and I'm tired of running. So you want to step into the light? On my terms, with someone who gets it." He paused. "What do you think?" Cleo looked at him, really looked, saw the exhaustion in his eyes, the tension in his shoulders, the way he held himself like he was bracing for another blow. But underneath all that, she saw something else, determination, the same stubborn refusal to give up that he'd talked about on their date, the shouting into hurricanes. "I think," she said slowly, "that Mira is going to hate this." Dario's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Good." The first time they sat down to actually work together, not just talk about working but do it, was 3 days after the coffee shop meeting. Dario had suggested his apartment, neutral territory, big table, good light. Cleo had agreed before her anxiety could talk her out of it. She arrived at 9 a.m. with her laptop, a notebook filled with half-formed ideas, and a knot in her stomach that felt like swallowing stones. Dario's building was in the Pearl District, new construction, all glass and steel, the kind of place that made you conscious of your reflection. He met her in the lobby. Gray sweater, jeans, barefoot, hair still damp from a shower. He looked tired but steady. "Hey," he said. "Hey." They rode the elevator in silence. Cleo watched the floor numbers climb and tried to remember how to breathe like a normal person. This was professional, a work session, nothing more. His apartment was exactly what she'd expected. Minimalist furniture, large windows overlooking the city, bookshelves filled with architecture texts and photography collections, a drafting table in the corner covered with sketches, everything intentional, everything chosen. "Coffee?" he asked. "Please." He disappeared into the kitchen. Cleo sat up at the dining table, opened her laptop, tried to look like someone who knew what she was doing. Through the window, she could see Mount Hood in the distance, snow-capped and impossibly clear against the blue sky. Dario returned with 2 mugs, set one in front of her. "I didn't know how you take it. There's milk and sugar on the counter." "Black is fine." She wrapped her hands around the mug, felt the warmth seep into her palms. "Thank you." He sat across from her, opened his own laptop. For a moment they just sat there, 2 people pretending this wasn't incredibly strange. "So," Dario said finally, "where do we start?" "I have some ideas, from the emails people have been sending, common threads." Cleo pulled up her notes. "The main one is, nobody has language for this, for what it feels like when your privacy is violated. They describe it as feeling dirty or exposed or like they've been robbed, but there's no single word that captures it. Because we don't have a framework for digital consent," Dario added. "We have frameworks for physical consent. We understand assault, trespassing, theft, but when someone live streams you without permission, what is that? What do we call it?" "Exactly." Cleo leaned forward, feeling the first spark of real engagement. "And without language, people can't defend themselves, can't explain why it hurts, so they get told they're overreacting. Or that they should have expected it because they were in a public place, which is bullshit. Complete bullshit." Dario smiled slightly. "Okay, so our first piece needs to be about language, giving people the words to describe their experience." They wrote for 3 hours straight, passing sentences back and forth. Dario would draft something, Cleo would refine it. Cleo would propose an argument, Dario would structure it. They fell into a rhythm that felt natural, almost easy. Around noon, Dario stood up, stretched. "I'm going to make lunch." "You eat sandwiches?" "I eat food, so yes." "Good, because sandwiches are my only culinary skill." He disappeared into the kitchen again. Cleo heard the refrigerator open, the sound of a knife on a cutting board, normal domestic sounds that felt surreal in the context of everything they'd been through. When he returned with 2 plates, turkey and avocado, simple but well-constructed, Cleo realized she was starving. They ate at the table, laptops pushed aside, and for a moment it almost felt normal. 2 colleagues working on a project, nothing traumatic, nothing complicated. "Can I say something?" Dario asked, setting down his sandwich. "Sure." "This is the first time in 3 weeks I felt like myself." He gestured at the table, the laptops, the half-written essay. "Working on something that matters, with someone who gets it, it's..." He stopped. "I didn't think I'd be able to do this, work with you, without it being weird or painful or full of unspoken resentment." "Is it? Any of those things?" "No." He met her eyes. "It's actually the opposite. I feel clear, like I have a purpose again that's bigger than just surviving the aftermath." Cleo understood exactly what he meant. For weeks she'd been drowning, hiding in her apartment, avoiding mirrors, existing in a fog of shame that made everything feel distant and unreal. But sitting here, working on this project, she felt solid again, present, real. "Me too," she said quietly. They finished lunch, went back to writing. By the time Cleo left at 4 p.m., they had a complete draft of their first collaborative piece. The vocabulary of violation. Why we need new language for digital consent. Standing in Dario's doorway, laptop bag over her shoulder, Cleo felt something shift. Not forgiveness, that would take longer, if it came at all, but maybe the beginning of something new. A way forward that acknowledged the damage without being defined by it. Same time next week? Dario asked. Yeah. Cleo smiled. Same time. They worked. Not like friends, not like romantic partners, like two soldiers who'd survived the same battle and now had a mission that mattered more than their personal feelings about each other. Dario set up the website. Cleo wrote the first essay, a meditation on her grandmother's cookbooks and what it meant to preserve things that the world wanted to discard. How privacy was like that, fragile, precious, easily destroyed by people who thought they knew better. They didn't talk about the date, didn't reference the moment in the rain when Dario had called what they'd had real. They focused on the work. But sometimes, late at night when they were both editing on a shared document, Cleo would see his cursor hovering near a paragraph she'd written, would watch him highlight a sentence, delete it, then type it back exactly the same. Like he was trying to understand her thought process. Like he cared about getting it right. The first essay went live on a Monday. By Wednesday, it had been shared 15,000 times. People wrote to them. Strangers from across the country who'd had their own privacy violated, who'd been photographed without consent, who'd become memes or viral moments or cautionary tales, who'd never had the language to explain why it hurt until they read Cleo's words. Privacy isn't about having something to hide. It's about having the right to choose what you share. And when that choice is taken from you, it doesn't matter if the content is flattering or not. The violation remains. Media outlets reached out. NPR wanted an interview. The New York Times was writing a think piece. Portland Scene magazine, Elena Rodriguez specifically, sent an email that was equal parts apology and request for a feature. Dario and Cleo turned them all down. If we do interviews, we become the story again, Dario said during one of their late-night editing sessions. They graduated to video calls now. Less intimate than working side by side, but safer. The project has to be bigger than us. Agreed. Cleo saved her latest draft, hesitated. Can I ask you something? Yeah. Do you regret it? That night at the Velvet Note, if you could go back and just not show up, would you? Dario was quiet for a long time. On her screen, she could see him in his apartment. Minimalist furniture, architectural sketches on the walls, a window showing the Portland skyline at night. Parts of it, he said finally, I regret the violation, the betrayal, the fact that 13,000 strangers now know things about me that I'd only told 3 people before that night. But, he stopped, started again. The conversation we had, before everything exploded, that part I don't regret, even knowing what came after. Cleo's throat tightened. Me neither. That's the tragedy of it, isn't it? Dario's smile was sad. We found something real in a completely artificial situation, and now we can never know what it might have been without the contamination. They sat in silence. 2 people on opposite sides of the city, connected by fiber optic cables and shared trauma, mourning something that never got the chance to exist. I should go, Dario said eventually. Early meeting tomorrow. Yeah, me too. Cleo didn't have a meeting, but she understood the need to end the call before the conversation went somewhere they couldn't come back from. Good night, Dario. Good night, Cleo. The screen went dark, and Cleo sat alone in her apartment, surrounded by books about preservation, wondering if some things were meant to be lost. The second essay was harder to write. Dario had suggested they tackle the live stream directly, walk through what happened from both perspectives, show readers the anatomy of a violation in real time. Cleo agreed in theory, but in practice, writing about those 2 hours meant reliving them. Meant describing the moment she discovered the stream, the sick realization in the bathroom stall, The choice she'd made to go back to the table instead of immediately ending it. "I keep getting stuck on the bathroom scene," she told Dario during their weekly check-in call. "I can write around it, but writing through it—" "You don't have to," Dario interrupted. "We can skip that part. Focus on the broader themes." "No, it's the most important part." Cleo pulled her laptop closer, stared at the blinking cursor. "It's the moment I chose truth over comfort. Even if I chose it too slowly, even if I should have run out of that bathroom and burned the whole thing down immediately, I still chose it. And that matters." "Okay," Dario's voice was soft. "Then write it. I'll read whatever you produce." Cleo wrote, deleted, wrote again, stayed up until 3 in the morning, wrestling with sentences that kept trying to excuse her behavior instead of examining it. Finally, exhausted and slightly delirious, she wrote, "I stood in that bathroom stall and made the worst choice possible. I prioritized my own comfort over Dario's right to know. 5 minutes. That's how long I let the violation continue while I decided how to tell him. 5 minutes is nothing. It's also everything, because those were 5 minutes where I chose the shape of the narrative over his autonomy. And that makes me complicit in a way that apologies cannot fix." She sent it to Dario at 3:47 a.m. Didn't expect a response until morning. Her phone rang at 3:51 a.m. "Hello?" "That paragraph." Dario's voice was rough, like he'd been sleeping, or crying, or both. "That's it. That's exactly it. The complicity, the way good intentions don't erase harm. I've been trying to articulate that for days and you just—" He stopped. "Can I use that as the opening for my section?" "Of course." "Thank you." A pause. "Are you okay?" The question caught her off guard. They'd been working together for 2 weeks, and this was the first time either of them had asked about anything beyond the project. "I don't know," Cleo admitted. "I think I'm broken in ways I don't have names for yet." "Yeah, me too." They stayed on the phone, neither speaking, just breathing into the silence until Dario finally said, "I'm glad you wrote that paragraph, not because it makes me feel better, but because it's true. And truth is the only foundation we have left. Truth is terrifying. Truth is the only thing that builds," Dario said, and Cleo heard the architect in his voice, the person who thought about foundations and structures and what it took to make something last. "Lies are easy. They go up fast, but they collapse. Truth takes longer, hurts more, but it holds." After they hung up, Cleo lay in bed watching the ceiling fan rotate slowly in the darkness, thought about foundations and truth and the difference between preserving something and building it new. By morning, she had the rest of the essay finished. The third essay was Dario's idea, what we owe each other. He'd been thinking about social contracts, he explained, the implicit agreements people make when they interact, how technology had broken those agreements without establishing new ones, how consent had become a legal concept instead of a moral one. When someone takes your photo at a restaurant, Dario wrote in his draft, they're not committing a crime, but they're violating an unspoken agreement that your meal, your conversation, your existence in that space belongs to you, that you have the right to exist without being documented. Cleo added her own section. "We used to have privacy by default. Now we have surveillance by default. And somewhere in that shift, we lost the understanding that other people's lives are not content, not material, not resources to be mined for entertainment or engagement or viral moments." They published it on a Thursday. By Friday, it had been shared 40,000 times. And by Saturday, Mira showed up at Cleo's apartment. Cleo saw her through the peephole, hair perfectly styled, makeup immaculate, wearing an expression that was equal parts contrition and calculation. "I know you're home," Mira called through the door. "Your lights are on, please, just 5 minutes." Cleo almost didn't open the door, almost let Mira stand in the hallway until she gave up and left. But that felt too much like the old Cleo, the one who avoided confrontation, who let things fester. She opened the door. "Thank you," Mira said, stepping inside before Cleo could invite her. "I've been trying to reach you for 3 weeks. You blocked my number, ignored my emails. I had to." "3 weeks ago, you turned my private date into a reality show," Cleo interrupted. "What did you expect?" Mira flinched. "I expected you to understand that I was trying to help you." "Help me?" "Yes, Cleo, you were wasting your life, hiding in that library basement, refusing to put yourself out there. I gave you a push, and it worked. You met someone amazing. Dario was perfect for you. The fact that it ended badly doesn't change that I was right about." "Get out." Mira stopped. "What?" "Get out of my apartment." Cleo's voice was steady, calm, the voice she used when explaining to donors why their grandmother's Bible couldn't be restored, when truth mattered more than comfort. "You violated my privacy. You violated Dario's privacy. You broadcast our conversation to thousands of strangers, and you're standing in my home telling me it was for my own good. I didn't mean for it to blow up like that, but you meant to live stream us. You meant to watch us without permission. You meant to turn a human moment into content." Cleo moved to the door, opened it wider. Everything that happened after, the viral videos, the articles, the fact that Dario can't go to a coffee shop without being recognized, all of that flows from your initial choice to treat us like we weren't real people. "That's not fair. I was trying to—" "I don't care what you were trying to do." Cleo felt something inside her shift, something that had been bent for too long, finally straightening. Impact matters more than intent. You hurt us. Own it or leave. Mira's mouth opened, closed. She looked like she wanted to argue, to explain, to make Cleo understand that everything she'd done came from a place of love. But Cleo had read enough about violated privacy to know love didn't excuse violation. Care didn't erase harm. Good intentions were just the road to someone else's hell. "I really was trying to help," Mira said quietly. "I know," Cleo's voice softened slightly, "but you can't help someone by stripping away their autonomy. That's just control wearing a friendship bracelet." Mira left without another word, and Cleo closed the door, leaned against it, and felt something like peace. The email arrived on a Tuesday from San Francisco Public Library at sfpl.org. Subject: Design Consultation Request. Cleo almost deleted it. She got occasional emails about book restoration consultations, usually from private collectors with more money than sense. But something about the sender made her pause. She opened it. "Dear Ms. Winters, my name is Patricia Chen, Director of the San Francisco Public Library System. I recently read your essay series, Privacy in Public, and was particularly moved by your work on preservation and the ethics of care. We're planning a major renovation of our Special Collections Department and are looking for someone who understands the intersection of preservation, privacy, and public access. Your perspective on how we treat fragile things, both objects and people, resonates deeply with our vision. Would you be interested in discussing a potential collaboration? The project would be based in San Francisco, but we're flexible on timing and remote work arrangements. I've also reached out to Dario Castellano about the architectural design. I believe your combined expertise could create something truly special. Best regards, Patricia Chen." Cleo read the email 3 times. San Francisco, where Dario's nightmare had started, where he'd been photographed and turned into a meme and had his entire life reduced to a headline. She called him. "Did you get an email from the San Francisco Public Library?" she asked without preamble. "Yeah, just now." Dario sounded as confused as she felt. "Did you?" "She wants us both." "I know." A pause. "That's either incredibly thoughtful or deeply manipulative." "Maybe both." They were quiet for a moment. Cleo could hear Dario breathing on the other end of the line. Could imagine him in his apartment, looking at the same email, weighing the same impossible choice. San Francisco is where it started for me, he said finally. Going back would be, I know, but it would also be on my terms, not hiding, not running, actually building something that matters. His voice strengthened. And it's a library, a place dedicated to preserving knowledge, making it accessible while protecting it. That's the whole tension we've been writing about. Cleo thought about her basement workshop at the Portland Central Library, about the books she'd saved and the ones she couldn't, about the difference between preservation and hoarding, between privacy and isolation. When would we need to decide? She asked. She wants to meet next month. Video call for now. In person later if we're interested. Are you interested? Are you? Dario turned the question back on her. Cleo looked around her apartment, at the sheets still covering the windows, at the cracked phone on the counter, at the life she'd built around safety and solitude and the careful avoidance of risk. I'm terrified, she admitted. Me too. She could hear the smile in his voice. But I've been terrified for 2 years, and I'm tired of letting fear make my decisions. So we say yes? We say maybe. We take the meeting, we see what they're actually proposing, and then we decide together. He paused. If that's okay with you. Together. The word hung between them, loaded with possibility. Okay, Cleo said. Together. The video call with Patricia Chen was scheduled for 2 weeks later. Cleo and Dario prepared separately, but in constant communication, shared research documents, traded ideas about what a privacy-focused special collections wing might look like, how you could make knowledge accessible while protecting the people who sought it. But underneath the professional collaboration, something else was building. Something neither of them acknowledged directly, but both felt acuted. It started small, Dario sending her a photo of a building he'd seen on his morning walk, just because he thought she'd appreciate the facade. Cleo sharing an article about medieval bookbinding techniques, followed by, thought you might find this interesting. Then Dario started signing off their calls with, sleep well, instead of good night. Cleo found herself checking her phone more often, looking for his messages. They began scheduling calls that had nothing to do with the project, just talking about Portland, about their childhoods, about what it meant to rebuild after everything had burned down. I miss it sometimes, Dario admitted during one of these calls. It was late. They'd both been working on separate projects and had ended up on the phone together. The comfortable silence of two people who didn't need to fill every moment with words. That hour at the Velvet Note, before, Cleo's heart skipped. Me too. We were so careful with each other, trying to be the version of ourselves that wouldn't scare the other person away. But it worked. We connected anyway. Do you think we would have worked? Cleo asked. If everything had gone normally? If there'd been a second date? A third? I don't know. Dario was quiet for a moment. Maybe we would have ghosted each other after 2 weeks. Maybe the magic only worked because it was contained. One perfect hour before reality set in. Or maybe we would have built something real. Maybe. They'd never talked about this directly, about the fact that everything they'd lost, the potential relationship, the natural progression from strangers to something more, had been stolen from them. They'd mourned the privacy violation, the public humiliation, but they'd never mourned the simple possibility of what they might have been. I think about it sometimes, Cleo said softly, what our third date might have looked like if we'd gotten there naturally. Yeah, maybe Powell's books, wandering the aisles, you showing me architecture books, me showing you restoration guides, arguing about whether form or function matters more. Dario laughed. I would have taken you to the Japanese garden, shown you how space can make you feel a certain way without using any words, made you admit that beauty is functional. I wouldn't have admitted that. You would have, eventually. The playfulness in his voice made Cleo smile. This was different from their collaboration. different from their shared mission. This was just them, the people they might have been without the trauma. Dario? Yeah? I know we can't go back. Can't have those dates we never got. But, she stopped, gathered courage. Do you think we could have a different kind of forward? Not the one that got stolen, but maybe something new? The silence stretched so long that Cleo thought the call had dropped. Then, I'd like that, Dario said quietly. But I need to be honest with you. I don't know if I can separate you from what happened. Every time I look at you, even on these video calls, part of me remembers standing in the rain, watching you tell me that 13,000 people had just witnessed my breakdown. I know it wasn't your fault. I know you didn't plan it, but the association is there, and I don't know if it ever goes away. The words hurt, but they were true, and truth was what they'd built this whole project on. I understand, Cleo said. Do you? Dario's voice was gentle. Because I'm not saying no, I'm saying I don't know, and that feels important to distinguish. It is important, Cleo took a breath. I don't know either. If I can separate you from the guilt I feel, from the knowledge that I participated in hurting you, even if it was unwitting, even if I tried to fix it, I still carry it. So we're both damaged, irreparably. But maybe, Dario stopped, started again. Maybe that's okay. Maybe we don't need to be undamaged to move forward. Maybe we just need to be honest about the scars. Cleo thought about the books she restored, how you could fix damage but couldn't erase it, how the best restoration work made the object whole without pretending it had never been broken. Honest about the scars, she repeated. I can do that. Me too. They stayed on the phone until Cleo's eyes started closing, until Dario's voice got slower and softer, until neither of them wanted to be the first to say goodbye. Sleep well, Dario finally said. You too. And this time, when Cleo hung up, she didn't feel alone. The meeting with Patricia Chen went better than expected. She was sharp, visionary, and clearly serious about creating something meaningful. The special collections renovation wasn't just about physical space. It was about rethinking how public institutions handled private materials. Letters, diaries, personal archives. How do you make them accessible for research while honoring the privacy of the people who created them? That's where you both come in, Patricia said, gesturing at the concept sketches she'd shared on screen. Dario, you understand how to build spaces that protect while inviting. Cleo, you understand how to preserve fragile things while allowing them to be used. Together, I think you could create something unprecedented. The project would take 9 months. Based in San Francisco, but with flexibility for remote work during the planning stages. Good pay, creative control, the chance to actually implement the ideas they've been writing about. After the call ended, Cleo and Dario sat in silence on their separate video feeds. We have to do this, Dario said finally. I know. But it means 9 months in San Francisco, where everything started for me, where I became hot architect. He laughed bitterly. I'll probably get recognized, photographed, the whole cycle starting over. Or, Cleo said carefully, it means 9 months reclaiming the city on your terms, building something meaningful instead of running from a memory. Is that what you tell yourself? About the velvet note? That someday you'll go back and reclaim it? The question caught her off guard. She hadn't been back to the velvet note since that night. Couldn't even walk past it without her chest tightening. No, she admitted. Some places stay contaminated. Exactly. Dario ran a hand through his hair. San Francisco is contaminated for me. But this project, he stopped. This project might be the antidote, or it might just reopen the wound. I can't tell which. Then we'll find out together. Dario met her eyes through the screen. You keep saying that, together. But Cleo, we're colleagues, collaborators, but we're not together. Not in the way that word usually means. I know. So what are we? The question hung between them. Cleo thought about the past month, the late-night calls, the shared documents, the way Dario had become the first person she wanted to tell when something good happened, and the only person who understood when something bad did. I think, she said slowly, we're two people trying to build something new from broken pieces, and maybe we don't need to define it more than that yet. Yet, Dario repeated, a small smile. Okay, I can work with yet. So we're doing this? San Francisco? We're doing this. He pulled up his calendar. Patricia wants an answer by Friday, and if we say yes, she wants us on site for the initial planning session in 3 weeks. 3 weeks. Cleo looked around her apartment, at the life she'd built around safety and isolation, at the choice in front of her. Stay here, stay safe, stay small, or risk everything again for the possibility of building something that mattered. I need to tell you something, she said suddenly, before we commit. Before we get on a plane to San Francisco and spend 9 months working in close quarters and pretending we're just professional colleagues. Dario's expression shifted, cautious. Okay, I have feelings for you. The words came out in a rush. Not leftover feelings from that night, not nostalgia for what might have been. Actual, present tense feelings for who you are now. The person who calls me at 3 a.m. to discuss essay structure, who sends me photos of buildings, who's brave enough to go back to the city where everything fell apart because the mission matters more than the fear. She stopped, took a breath. And I needed you to know that before we do this, because if we're going to work together, we need to be honest, and that's my honesty. Dario was very still. She couldn't read his expression. Say something, she finally said. He stopped, started again. Cleo, I don't know what to do with that. You don't have to do anything with it. I just needed to say it, needed you to know. And now we can move forward with that information in the open, instead of me pretending it doesn't exist while we're sharing office space in San Francisco. This is the worst timing. I know. We're about to start a professional collaboration, a serious one. That requires us to work closely together. I know. And you're telling me you have feelings for me. Yes. Dario laughed. It started quiet and built into something almost hysterical. You're either the bravest person I've ever met or the most self-destructive. Maybe both. Definitely both. He wiped his eyes. Okay, since we're being honest, I have feelings for you too. Which is insane because you're right. We barely know each other outside of trauma. But every time we talk, I find myself wanting it to last longer. And every time I see your name on my phone, I smile before I even read the message. And that terrifies me, because the last time I let myself feel something for you, it ended with me standing in the rain, watching everything fall apart. So what do we do? Cleo asked. I have no idea. Dario's smile was fragile. But I know what we don't do. We don't pretend this conversation didn't happen. We don't shove these feelings into a box and hope they stay there. We acknowledge them. And then we go to San Francisco, work on this project, and figure out if there's a version of us that can exist outside the trauma. Schrodinger's relationship. Exactly. It might work, it might not, but we won't know until we open the box. Cleo felt something in her chest unclench. Relief, terror, hope, all mixed together. Okay, she said, let's open the box. San Francisco felt like stepping into someone else's memory. Cleo stood outside the airport terminal, waiting for the rideshare, and tried to reconcile the city in front of her with the city from Dario's stories. She'd imagined something darker, more hostile, the kind of place that chewed people up and turned them into headlines. But it was just a city, fog rolling off the bay, cars honking, people rushing past with coffee cups and distracted expressions, utterly ordinary. Her phone buzzed. Dario. Landed yet? Cleo. Just got outside. You? Dario. At the hotel, room 447. Patricia wants to meet at the library at 2. That gives us 3 hours to settle in. Cleo, see you soon. The rideshare took her through streets she recognized from movies, but had never walked. Past Victorian houses painted in colors that seemed designed to defy the fog. Through neighborhoods that shifted character every few blocks. Tech money giving way to old money, giving way to the beautiful decay of areas that hadn't gentrified yet. The hotel was in Soma, modern, anonymous. The kind of place designed for business travelers who needed clean sheets and reliable Wi-Fi and nothing else. Cleo checked in, rode the elevator to the 4th floor, found her room 3 doors down from Dario's. She knocked on 447. He opened the door immediately, like he'd been waiting. He looked different here, more tense. His shoulders carried a weight they hadn't in Portland. "Hey," he said. "Hey." Cleo stepped inside. His room was identical to hers. Same beige walls, same generic art, same window overlooking the street. "How are you feeling?" "Like I'm 17 again and walking into the school where everyone's seen an embarrassing photo of me." He sat on the edge of the bed. "I know that's not rational. San Francisco has 900,000 people. The chances of anyone recognizing me are..." "It's not about rational." Cleo sat in the desk chair, gave him space. "You're back in the city where it happened. That's enough to make anyone feel exposed." "Yeah." He was quiet for a moment. "I keep thinking about the awards ceremony, that photo, how proud I was of my work, and then how quickly that pride turned into something else when I realized people weren't looking at the architecture. They were just looking at me. I'm sorry that happened to you." "I know," he met her eyes. "And I'm sorry for what happened to you. I know we both apologized 17 different ways, but being back here, it makes me realize how much we're still carrying." Cleo thought about the velvet note, about how she still couldn't walk past it, how some places stayed contaminated no matter how much time passed. "Do you want to talk about it?" she asked. "Before we meet Patricia, clear the air." "No." Dario stood, moved to the window. "I want to do the opposite. I want to go to the library where that photo was taken, stand in that exact spot, and prove to myself that I'm not the same person who ran away 2 years ago." "That sounds terrifying." "It is." He turned back to her. "Will you come with me?" Of course. The San Francisco Main Library was beautiful in a way that made Cleo's chest ache. 7 stories of books and light, and the kind of civic architecture that believed in the possibility of knowledge changing lives. Dario stopped in the main atrium, looked up at the skylight, at the way afternoon sun filtered through geometric panels and painted patterns on the marble floor. "There," he said quietly, pointing to a spot near the circulation desk. "That's where I was standing when someone took the photo." Cleo looked, saw nothing remarkable, just space, just light, just the ordinary flow of people moving through a public building. "What were you thinking about?" she asked, in that moment. "My grandmother." Dario walked toward the spot and Cleo followed. "She taught me to read in a library like this. In Rome, where I grew up before we moved to the States. I was 7. She'd take me every Saturday, let me wander the stacks while she read newspapers in the reading room. And that day, the day of the photo, I was standing here thinking, she would have been so proud." He stopped at the exact spot, looked around like he was seeing ghosts. Then someone posted the photo, "Hot architect at SF Library." And within 6 hours, I had 3,000 new Instagram followers who didn't care about my grandmother or the library or why any of it mattered. They just cared that I looked good in profile. Cleo moved to stand beside him, not touching, just present. "You can't control how people see you," she said softly, "but you can control what you build. And this," she gestured at the library around them, "this is what you built. Not the photo, not the headline, the actual work. I know that intellectually, but not emotionally. Not yet." He took a breath, let it out slowly. "But maybe I'm getting there." They stood together in the space where his life had fractured, where pride had turned to violation, where the story had started that eventually led to a rainy night in Portland and a blind date that became a viral catastrophe. And slowly, Cleo felt something shift. Not healing, that was too simple, but maybe the beginning of reclamation, the understanding that places held only the power you gave them. "Thank you," Dario said, "for being here. Always." He looked at her then, really looked, and Cleo saw something in his expression she couldn't quite name. Gratitude, yes, but also something deeper, something that felt like recognition. Before she could identify it, his phone buzzed. "Patricia, running 15 minutes early. Are you nearby? Would love to give you the full tour." Dario showed Cleo the text. "Ready?" "Ready." Patricia Chen was everything her emails had suggested. Whip-smart, visionary, and deeply serious about the intersection of access and privacy. She met them in the Special Collections reading room, a space that felt like a cathedral dedicated to the fragile and precious. Temperature controlled, humidity monitored, light carefully managed, rows of wooden desks where researchers worked in reverential silence. "This is what we have now," Patricia said, gesturing around the room. "Beautiful, functional, but completely inadequate for what we're trying to do." "Which is?" Cleo asked. "Make private archives accessible without violating the privacy they were created to protect." Patricia pulled out a tablet, showed them architectural renderings. "We have collections of personal letters, diaries, family photos, materials that are historically significant but deeply intimate. Right now, anyone can request access. We scan and digitize, put it all online in the name of preservation and public access." "But," Dario prompted, "but we're wrestling with the ethics of it." Patricia swiped through images of diary pages, love letters, photos of people who'd been dead for 50 years. These people didn't consent to having their private thoughts made public. They're dead. They can't consent. Their families donated the materials thinking they'd be preserved, not broadcast. So where's the line? Cleo felt her pulse quicken. This was exactly the question they'd been wrestling with in their essays. But theoretical became concrete when you were looking at actual handwriting, actual faces, actual evidence of lives lived in private. "You need spaces within spaces," Dario said, and Cleo could see him already designing in his mind. A way to make materials available for serious research while protecting them from casual exposure. "Exactly," Patricia smiled. "That's why I wanted you both. Dario, you understand how to create physical spaces that honor privacy. Cleo, you understand how to preserve fragile things while allowing them to be used. Together we might be able to build something that actually works," Cleo finished. They spent the next 2 hours walking through the existing Special Collections wing. Patricia showed them the storage areas, climate-controlled rooms filled with acid-free boxes containing centuries of private lives. She showed them the digitization lab, where technicians scanned letters written by soldiers during World War II, teenagers during the 1960s, immigrants writing home in languages their children no longer spoke. "Every one of these is someone's privacy," Patricia said, holding a letter carefully. "But it's also history, evidence of how people lived, loved, struggled. If we hide it all away, we lose the record. If we expose it all, we violate the people who created it. So how do we honor both?" Dario and Cleo exchanged a look. This was bigger than their personal experience, bigger than a live stream date or a viral photo. This was the fundamental tension of living in a documented world. How do you preserve memory without commodifying it? How do you share knowledge without violating the people it came from? "We'll need time to develop a proposal," Dario said, "but I think we can do this." "How much time?" 3 months for initial designs, another 6 for implementation. He looked at Cleo. "If that works for you?" 9 months. In San Francisco, working on a project that addressed the exact issues they'd been writing about. It works, Cleo said. Patricia's smile widened. Then let's get started. They fell into a new rhythm. Mornings at the library, working with Patricia and her team. Afternoons sketching designs, drafting proposals, arguing about the balance between access and protection. Evenings at the hotel, eating takeout and editing each other's work. It felt like Portland but different. More intense, more consequential. In Portland, they'd been healing through words. In San Francisco, they were healing through action. Dario designed spaces that invited research, but required intention. You couldn't just stumble into the private archives. You had to request access, state your purpose, agree to ethical guidelines about citation and use. The architecture itself would create friction, not to prevent access, but to ensure it was thoughtful. Cleo developed preservation protocols that protected materials from overexposure while making them available. Limited scanning, careful handling, the understanding that not everything needed to be digitized, that sometimes the best preservation was simply knowing something existed and trusting that serious researchers would make the effort to see it in person. It's like your grandmother's cookbooks, Dario said one evening. They were in Cleo's hotel room. His had better light, but hers had a desk big enough for both of them to work. You save them by fixing them, not by photographing every page and posting them online. Exactly. Cleo looked up from her laptop. Some things are meant to be held, not shared. Experienced in private, not broadcast. That should be one of our principles. For the project, Dario made a note. Some knowledge requires proximity. Digital access isn't always appropriate access. They worked until midnight, until Cleo's vision started blurring and Dario was rubbing his eyes, until the only sound was typing and the occasional siren from the street below. I should go, Dario said finally, but he didn't move. Yeah, Cleo agreed, but she didn't want him to. This had become their pattern, working late, talking later. The conversation always more honest in the dark, when they were too tired to guard themselves properly. Can I ask you something? Dario said. Always. Are you happy, being here, doing this? Cleo thought about the question. 3 months ago, she'd been hiding in her Portland apartment, drowning in shame. 2 months ago, she'd been working with Dario remotely, building something meaningful but keeping him at arm's length. Now she was in San Francisco, in a hotel room that smelled like takeout and ambition, working on a project that felt like it might actually change things. Yes, she said, I'm happy. Are you? Yeah, Dario smiled, but it was complicated. Which surprises me. I thought being back here would break me. But instead I feel, he paused, whole. Maybe for the first time since that photo was taken. Like I'm finally bigger than what happened to me. You were always bigger than that. But I didn't feel it. I felt small, reduced, like my entire identity had been condensed into a headline and a half-decent jawline. He looked at her. Working with you changes that. Makes me remember that I'm an architect, that I build things that matter. Cleo's chest tightened. Dario, I know we said we'd figure out what we are after the project. He stood, gathered his laptop and notes. But I think I'm already figuring it out. And it's more than colleagues. It's more than trauma bonding. He stopped, shook his head. It's late, he finished. I'm not making sense. Forget I said anything. I won't forget. I know. He moved to the door, stopped with his hand on the knob. That's what scares me. After he left, Cleo sat at her desk for another hour, staring at her laptop without seeing it, thinking about proximity and access, about what it meant to let someone close, about how terrifying it was to want something when you'd already lost it once in the worst possible way. The breakthrough came 3 weeks into the project. Cleo was in the special collections storage room, examining a collection of letters from the 1940s. Love letters mostly, soldiers writing home, wives writing back. The kind of correspondence that was achingly intimate, fears and hopes, and the small details of daily life that only mattered to the two people sharing them. One letter stopped her cold. "I know you'll read this after I'm gone," it began, "and I want you to know, I don't mind. These words are for you, but they're also evidence that we existed, that what we had was real. So if someone finds these someday, a researcher, a stranger, someone trying to understand what it was like to love during war, I give them permission. I give you permission. Let our privacy become public if it helps someone else feel less alone." Cleo read it 3 times. Then she took a photo with her phone, carefully, respecting the light sensitivity, and sent it to Dario. 5 minutes later, he was standing in the storage room doorway. "Did you read it?" Cleo asked. "Yeah. This changes everything." She held up the letter. "We've been thinking about privacy as something that's always violated when it's exposed. But what if the people themselves chose to make it public? What if they consented, even posthumously? Documentation of consent." Dario moved closer, reading over her shoulder. "We could build that into the archive system. Letters or notes from the donors, or the original creators giving explicit permission for their materials to be shared. And for materials without consent, we create different levels of access." Cleo was thinking out loud now, the ideas coming fast. Maybe some things stay private forever. Some things become accessible after a certain number of years. Some things are available only to specific types of researchers with specific ethical commitments. Consent as the organizing principle. Dario pulled out his phone, started taking notes. Not just legal consent, ethical consent, the understanding that these were real people who deserve agency over their own stories, even after death. They spent the rest of the day developing the framework. By evening, they had something Patricia needed to see. She met them in her office, read their proposal in silence. When she finished, she looked up with an expression Cleo couldn't quite read. "This is exactly what we needed," Patricia said quietly. "I've been trying to articulate this for years, the tension between preservation and violation, and you found the answer: consent. It's so obvious I can't believe I missed it." "It's not obvious," Cleo said. "It's just, we've been living it, the absence of consent, the violation. So we know what it looks like from the inside." Patricia nodded slowly. "I want to make this the foundation of our entire approach, not just for this renovation, but for our collection policies going forward. Can you develop it further? Turn it into guidelines we can actually implement?" Dario and Cleo exchanged a look. "Yes," they said simultaneously. 2 months into the San Francisco project, Cleo realized she'd stopped thinking about Portland. Not entirely. She still paid her rent, still kept her apartment, but she'd stopped thinking of it as home, stopped planning her return. Started thinking about what it would mean to stay here, in this city that had been Dario's nightmare and was becoming their shared possibility. They were walking along the Embarcadero after a long day at the library. The Bay Bridge lit up against the darkening sky. Tourists everywhere taking photos, eating ice cream, existing loudly in the exact way that used to make Cleo retreat. But she didn't feel the need to retreat anymore. "I talked to my landlord today," she said, "in Portland." Dario looked over. "Yeah? I'm thinking about subletting for 6 months. See how I feel about staying here longer term." "How do you feel about it?" Terrified. Cleo stopped walking, leaned against the railing overlooking the water. 3 months ago, I couldn't leave my apartment. Now I'm considering moving to a new city. It feels like whiplash. Or growth. Dario leaned beside her. "You're not the same person who went on that blind date. Neither are you." "No," he smiled. "I'm not sure who I am anymore, but I think I like him better than the person I was before." They watched the water, watched the boats, watched the city behind them light up as dusk turned to evening. "Dario?" "Yeah? Remember when you said we were Schrodinger's relationship? That we wouldn't know if we worked until we opened the box?" "I remember. I think the box is open." Cleo turned to face him. "I think it's been open for a while, and I know what I see. Dario went very still. What do you see? Someone who makes me want to be braver, who understands that privacy is sacred, but connection is necessary, who's been hurt in the same way I've been hurt and chooses to build instead of hide. She took a breath. I see someone I'm falling in love with, and I know that's terrifying given how we started, but I think I've been falling since that night at the Velvet Note, and I'm tired of pretending I'm not. The silence stretched. A boat horn sounded somewhere on the bay. Behind them, someone laughed. Cleo, Dario started, you don't have to say anything back. She kept talking before her courage failed. I just needed you to know, needed to stop living in the space where we pretend we're just colleagues, just collaborators, just two people working through shared trauma, because we're more than that. At least, I am. Dario reached out, took her hand. His fingers were warm despite the evening chill. I'm falling too, he said quietly. Have been for weeks, maybe months, but I kept telling myself it was just proximity, just the intensity of the project, He stopped. Just fear disguised as rationality. And now? Now I think I'm done being afraid. He pulled her closer. I think I want to see what we are when we're not running from it. Cleo felt her heart hammering. This was different from the Velvet Note. Different from that first rush of connection before everything exploded. This was earned, built, the product of two people who'd seen each other at their worst and chosen to stay anyway. So what do? She asked. We do what we've been doing. Dario's smile was soft. We work. We build. We figure it out as we go. But we stop pretending we're not. He paused. Whatever this is. And what is this? I don't know yet. He brought her hand to his lips, kissed her knuckles gently. But I'd like to find out. They told Patricia the next day. Not because they had to. It wasn't technically relevant to the project, but because pretending felt dishonest, and they'd built their entire collaboration on honesty. Patricia took the news with the calm of someone who'd seen it coming from miles away. Good, she said simply. You'll work better if you stop dancing around it. You're not concerned about professional boundaries? Dario asked. Should I be? Patricia raised an eyebrow. You're both adults. You're doing excellent work. Whatever's happening in your personal lives isn't my business unless it interferes with the project. Does it? No, Cleo said. Then we're fine. Patricia turned back to her computer. Just don't let it make your writing sappy. People come to your essays for insight, not romance. After they left her office, Dario laughed for the first time in what felt like weeks. Don't let it make your writing sappy, he repeated. That's the most Patricia thing I've ever heard. She's not wrong, though. Cleo felt lighter than she had in months. Our credibility comes from being clear-eyed about trauma, not from turning it into a love story. But it is a love story. Dario stopped walking, turned to face her in the middle of the library corridor. Not the one we wanted, not the one we would have chosen, but a love story that came from surviving something terrible and deciding to build something good anyway. That's too sappy for an essay. Way too sappy. He kissed her forehead. But it's true. They went back to work, but something had shifted. They could sit close now without it being fraught, could touch without overthinking, could exist in the same space as two people who were figuring out how to be together, instead of two people pretending they weren't. The project continued, designs developed, guidelines written. A framework emerged that Patricia said would change how libraries everywhere thought about private collections. And underneath it all, Cleo and Dario built something else, something quieter, something that didn't need an audience or validation from strangers, something that existed just for them. 4 months into San Francisco, Cleo got an email from Mira. Subject, I'm sorry, for real this time. She almost deleted it, had deleted the previous 17 emails without reading, but something about this one made her pause. She opened it. Cleo, I know you probably won't read this. I know I've apologized before and it didn't mean anything because I was still making excuses, still trying to justify what I did. I'm in therapy now, have been for 3 months, talking about boundary issues in control masquerading as care. My therapist asked me to write you a letter, not to send, just to process. But I think you deserve to actually receive it. What I did was unforgivable. I violated your privacy and Dario's privacy because I thought I knew better than you what you needed. I turned your life into content because I was so desperate for relevance that I was willing to sacrifice your autonomy for views. I told myself I was helping you, but really, I was using you. Your loneliness, your trust in me, I weaponized all of it for my own agenda. And I can't take that back, can't undo the harm, can only sit with the knowledge that I hurt someone I claim to love. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm just asking you to know that I see it now. The damage, the violation. And I'm trying to become someone who would never do that again. I hope San Francisco is good to you. I hope the project is everything you wanted. I hope Dario is, God, I don't even know what to hope for there. But I hope you're happy. I'm sorry. Mira. Cleo read it twice, felt nothing, then felt everything, then felt something in between, not forgiveness exactly, but maybe the distant possibility of it someday. She showed the email to Dario that night. What do you think? She asked. I think she's working on herself, which is good, necessary. He handed her phone back. But it doesn't change what happened, and you don't owe her anything. Not forgiveness, not even a response. I know. Do you want to respond? Cleo thought about it, about the Mira she'd been friends with for 7 years before that night, about the person who'd held her when her grandmother died, who'd helped her move apartments, who'd been there for countless small moments that mattered. Not yet, she said. Maybe someday, but not yet. That's fair. She deleted the email, not out of anger, just out of the understanding that some doors needed to stay closed until you were ready to open them. And she wasn't ready. The library renovation was scheduled to begin in 2 months. Patricia had secured funding. The board had approved their proposals. Everything was moving forward exactly as planned. Except Cleo and Dario hadn't talked about what happened after. They were at Cleo's hotel room. She'd stopped bothering to maintain her own room, basically lived in his now, working on the final implementation guidelines when Dario's phone rang. He glanced at it, frowned, answered. Hello? Yes, this is... Wait, what? His expression changed. When? Is he... Okay, I'll be on the next flight. Thank you for calling. He hung up, sat very still. Dario? Cleo touched his arm. What happened? My father had a heart attack. He's stable now, but... His voice cracked. I need to go to Boston. My mother needs... I need to be there. Of course, I'll book your flight right now. Cleo was already pulling up airline websites. When do you want to leave? As soon as possible. He stood, started packing. Movements automatic, mind clearly somewhere else. I don't know when I'll be back. Could be a few days. Could be longer if... Don't think about the project, just go. Be with your family. He stopped packing, looked at her. Come with me. What? Come with me, to Boston, to meet... He stopped, started again. I don't want to do this alone, and I want you there. Cleo felt something shift in her chest. This wasn't about the project, wasn't about privacy or trauma or building frameworks for ethical archives. This was Dario asking her to be part of his actual life, the messy, real, unglamorous parts. Okay, she said, let me pack. Boston was cold, colder than San Francisco, colder than Portland. The kind of February cold that made Cleo's bones ache. Dario's parents lived in Cambridge, a brownstone near Harvard, the kind of neighborhood where every building looked like it had stories stretching back centuries. His mother met them at the door, small, elegant, eyes red from crying. She looked at Cleo with surprise, then at Dario with a question. "Mom, this is Cleo," Dario said. He paused. They'd never actually defined it. "My girlfriend." The word felt new, fragile, perfect. Come in, come in." His mother ushered them inside, already talking. "He's sleeping now. They say he'll be fine. Full recovery expected." But the scare, her voice broke. Dario wrapped his arms around her. "I'm here, Mom. It's okay." Cleo stood in the entryway, feeling like an intruder. This was family, private, the kind of moment that didn't need a stranger's witness. But Dario's mother pulled back, looked at her directly. "Thank you for coming, for being here for him. He needs—" She stopped. "He needs people who understand." They stayed in Boston for 5 days. Cleo met Dario's father once he was awake, charming even from a hospital bed, already arguing with doctors about discharge dates. Met his sister, who flew in from Seattle with her 2 kids. Sat through family dinners where everyone talked over each other in a mix of English and Italian and love. And she saw a different side of Dario. Not the careful architect, not the traumatized victim, just a son, a brother, a person embedded in a web of relationships that existed long before she met him. On their last night, they walked through Harvard Yard, snow falling softly, the campus quiet. "Thank you," Dario said, "for being here, for," he gestured vaguely, "everything. I wanted to be here." "I know, but you didn't have to be. We've only been together—" He stopped. "Actually, how long have we been together? We never technically defined a start date." Cleo thought about it. "I think we've been together since the Velvet Note. We just didn't know it yet. That's very romantic. I contain multitudes." She leaned into his warmth. "But if we need an official date, I'd say that night on the Embarcadero, when we stopped pretending." "Works for me." He kissed the top of her head. "I love you, you know." The words hung in the cold air, simple, clear, utterly terrifying. "I know," Cleo said. "I love you too." They stood in the falling snow, 2 people who'd found each other in the worst possible way and somehow made it work anyway. 2 people who understood that privacy was sacred, but intimacy was worth the risk. "What happens when we go back to San Francisco?" Dario asked. "After the project ends?" "I don't know." Cleo pulled back to look at him. "What do you want to happen?" "I want—" He stopped, started again. "I want to keep building things with you, not just libraries, not just frameworks for consent, but a life, something real and private and ours." "I want that too." "Yeah?" "Yeah." They walked back to his parents' house, hand in hand, making plans for a future that felt possible for the first time since everything had fallen apart. And Cleo realized they'd done it. They'd taken the worst violation either of them had experienced and turned it into something meaningful. Not by forgetting, not by forgiving the people who'd hurt them, but by choosing to build something new from the broken pieces. That was the real resolution, not a fairy tale ending, just 2 damaged people deciding they were worth the effort of healing together.